South Africa is experiencing an energy crisis. Take a look at this chart. This year, the country has had one day with consistent electricity. But for more than 185 days, South Africa has experienced load shedding, over 3,000 hours without power.
And it's expected to double by the end of the year. So the extent of load shedding is growing, worsening, and it is becoming a permanent fixture in South African life.
The problem has become so dire that President Cyril Ramaphosa declared
a national state of disaster to respond to the electricity crisis and its effect.
So why is South Africa in the dark? So what exactly is load shedding? It's a term often used in South Africa for planned rolling electricity blackouts. And it's become a problem in other countries with developing economies, like India, Pakistan, and Lebanon.
In South Africa, they're carried out by Eskom, a state utility company that supplies more than 90% of the country's electricity.
Load shedding should be understood as a preventative measure to prevent an electrical grid from collapse and from severe damage.
That's energy policy researcher Brian Kamanzi. His working paper, The Crisis in South Africa's Energy Sector, explores the Eskom crisis in the country's transition to renewable energy.
You see, the bulk of South Africa's power is generated by old, dilapidated coal-fired power plants that were built in the 60s and 70s.
Because the system cannot meet the demand for electricity, Eskom shorts the supply by load shedding, which occurs in stages ranging from 1 to 8.
During stage 1, residents might go without power 3 times over an 8-day period for 4 hours at a time. Stage 8 is worse. Load shedding would occur 6 times a day or for 12 hours, depending on the schedule.
On June 11th, Eskom issued this power alert.
Stage 4 load shedding will be implemented from 1600 hours until midnight. Can you imagine being without power regularly for 8 hours? Well, South Africans have been dealing with blackouts like this since 2007. These blackouts rattle every aspect of daily life, affecting hospitals, education, and the food and water supplies. You might remember this viral video of workers removing 50,000 dead chickens from a farm. The birds reportedly suffocated when power outages caused the ventilation system to stop. Then there's South Africa's economy. Load shedding is both creating and adding to the nation's high unemployment rate and its faltering economy, costing South Africa almost 900 million rand or $48 million a day.
Because load shedding is a rotational rationing, everyone in South Africa is impacted by load shedding. Of course, different people and organizations are able to insulate themselves from the impacts of load shedding because they have the resources.
Resources like solar energy, battery systems, and diesel generators. And those who don't have access are hit the hardest.
It's drifting people more into energy poverty. People are switching to fuels like paraffin and candle burning for lighting.
Some Black communities are 3.5 times more likely to have power cuts than majority white areas.
Eskom has even been accused of using longer outages in Black neighborhoods.
The particular hours that were being load shed for Black working class users, especially in townships, was very punitive, was at the precise times that they may be returning from home, and it was observed to be racially biased.
But energy racism is not new to South Africa.
Part of the crisis that we are seeing is the lack of the ability of the ANC government to establish a new progressive economic paradigm in the post-apartheid era that can both industrialize but also can extend its benefits to the broader population, to the Black working class in particular.
So let's take a step back. Apartheid was a legal system for racial segregation against non-white residents of South Africa.
It began in 1948, after the National Party were voted into power by the white minority. The party governed South Africa for decades.
We have every right to maintain our identity as whites.
From 1948 to 1971, the National Party instituted 148 apartheid laws, dividing people by race: white, colored, native or Black, and Asian or Indian. Race controlled every aspect of life in South Africa, from jobs, public facilities, and transportation, to education and health systems.
Black people even had to carry passbooks, which restricted where they could travel and stipulated where they worked.
Under apartheid, 3.5 million non-white South Africans were also removed from cities and their homes and relocated to segregated urban townships or mostly rural Bantustans. During this period, Eskom was the electricity utility of the settler colonial apartheid state. It principally provided electricity to the country's ruling white minority and subsidized service for the country's manufacturing and mining sectors.
Electricity hadn't been as integrated as it is now into what people consider to be the basic elements of living a decent life. So there's very low levels of rural electrification. The inequality of infrastructure was mapped onto the inequalities enshrined in the apartheid project.
By 1994, apartheid had ended, but only about half of South Africans had electricity. Nearly all white households had access, but many black families had none.
There was at the turnover of the new government, an impulse to redistribute access to basic services. We had a mass rural electrification scheme that was largely financed through public funds. We had the concept of free basic services, of free basic electricity.
South Africa's new ANC government came to power promising to serve the country's poor, but its leaders soon embraced pro-business neoliberal policies that worsened inequality. Under the ANC, Eskom had been plagued by decades of corruption and mismanagement.
Inadequate planning was done to ensure that there is sufficient generation capacity procured. So we failed to plan, but also we failed to maintain what we have, leads to poor performance.
In 2007, South Africa started construction on two of the world's largest coal-fired plants, Medupi and Kusile. They were touted as the answer to load shedding and the country's energy crisis. But due to design flaws and equipment failures, 16 years later,
both the plants, are operating well below 50% of their capacity. It's a devastating situation.
Other estimates put one plant at 70% operational and the other at just over 37%. Currently, the South African government is focused on improving the performance of its existing coal fleet and procuring renewable energy from other producers. Regarding long-term solutions, there are calls for the country to cut its carbon emissions by transitioning to renewable energies like wind and solar. Ending reliance on fossil fuels and shifting to renewable energy is generally considered to be one of the most effective ways of fighting the climate crisis. But it does come with challenges. First, South Africa's coal mines employed 90,000 people. And renewable energy is still often expensive, so many people can't afford to install systems that support it. Plus, South Africa's electricity infrastructure doesn't really support renewable energy.
We are having issues implementing our capacity requirements, and a lot of that has to do with transmission. So the transmission network, which is essentially the highways of the electricity system that is built throughout the country, it was never designed to accommodate a massive build-out of renewable energy.
But Kamanzi also warns that the transition to renewable energy in South Africa has become associated with privatization.
Not all that glitters is gold. There are glittery plans that are being made in international forums to say South Africa is going green and that there will be all these jobs created.
But that's not necessarily true. Shortly after South Africa announced plans to go green at the COP27 summit, the coal-fired Komati power station was shut down,
which, without the requisite planning, that have left many people in the plant and people indirectly employed in the area, without livelihood.
Other countries dealing with load shedding are also trying to figure out how to solve this growing problem. How South Africa moves to make an equitable transition to renewable energy could offer solutions for others as well.
We have to look at what's actually happening on the ground. Who is in the room? Unions and civil society organizations have not been part of the negotiating teams that are engaging with the World Bank, engaging with governments from the UK, France, and the US who are offering climate finance. Are we putting questions like affordability at the center? Are we putting universal access at the center? What are the principles that are driving our transition? Who gets to make those choices? I think that what happens in South Africa, and the lesson that we have to share with the South, is the importance of consultation, the importance of not leaving everybody behind, but also the risk that comes with privatizing the transition.